1930, and America's economy is on a dizzying downward spiral. Farms, businesses, and banks are failing. Unemployment is growing. But President Herbert Hoover is convinced that the same forces that caused the stock market crash will also produce recovery. He says prosperity is just around the corner. But the corner seems nowhere in sight. Overseas, the last Allied occupation troops leave the Rhineland and Saar regions. Britain, the United States, Japan, France, and Italy sign a treaty on naval disarmament. America begins dismantling its warships. But in Germany, the Nazis gain in power and become Germany's second largest political party. Mussolini's power and popularity grow in Italy. In Spain, a civil war begins. And in Japan, military power keeps expanding. Americans can feel proud that their scientists have discovered one more of the solar system's planets, Pluto, and they've developed the cyclotron to probe the secrets of the atom. But that's little comfort to them as they suffer through the worst depression in America's history. This and much more is the year 1930. Let's watch.
8 hours after she left home for her trip to India, a mass of sprawling, tortured wreckage, a great pile of twisted steel is all that's left of the world's greatest air monster, aviation's biggest disaster in 1930. There wasn't much left to find after the crash in the sleepy village of Beauvais. The cream of British airmen gave their lives to their country, and they're on their way back home, their last long ride to the great beyond. The fire's in a pillow factory, and up there, one of the employees is trapped, and he has to jump. Here he comes! Look out! And he's safe in the net. Phew! The first time in history that an 8-story leap was successful. Some fire department. Boy, talk about your thrills! Thousands of nationalists crowd the great tent to hear the farewell message of Gandhi, leader of the demands for India's independence. Its echoes were heard in London recently during the Imperial Conference, and there may be fireworks. The question mark lands after a 37-hour flight of 4,000 miles. Bellant, partner in the great journey, and Coste, leader of the expedition and idol of France. Photographers' flashlights serenade the two flyers who made the first non-stop flight from Paris to New York after 10 men had been lost trying the same thing. And their reception of Broadway resembles the Lindy celebration. The canyons of lower New York seem like a great cabaret with all the ticker tape and torn paper floating in the air. You did a great job, Coste, and the same to you, Bellant. Without any warning, the earthquake hit 95 counties in the heart of Italy, and soldiers worked day and night to save imprisoned victims. The misery was unspeakable. Some of them cannot leave the pile of wreckage they used to call home. Authorities evacuated the district and sent in new troops to relieve the others. Yet optimism springs eternal. Already they're rebuilding. The city's free employment agency was scheduled to open at 9 o'clock, and by 3, several thousand job seekers were already in line. The recent census placed the number of New York's unemployed because of the Depression at 254,000, and the new bureau was started to help some of the unfortunate in getting located. All day they came in a never-ending stream. The scene was remarkably free of trouble, although occasionally someone tried to sneak up ahead of his turn. The Emperor comes, the 29-year-old ruler of 85 million souls. He's worshipped by his people as being of divine appointment. Once a year, he visits his summer palace, and there, on a snow-white platform, he reviews the current class of the student reserve. Each year finds about 8,000 ready to enter the army in case of necessity. One strange surviving custom is the ceremonial goose step, a relic of the days before the World War when German military advisors trained the Japanese army. At the head are the school teachers with the ever-present black derby, and then the students. The Emperor's very proud of them. The big thrill is the dipping of the colors. I don't know much about this subject, but they tell me that the girls are showing their hair long to go with the new long dresses. Am I right, ladies? Well, it looks good to me. Anyhow, the men have nothing to say. We have to like it. But as long as we don't wear ours that way, I'm satisfied. This must be the bearded lady. Bridget says she likes a boyish bob, and all the conventions in the world can't make her change her mind. She's getting the whole works, including a manicure. Now for a little hair tonic. The bobs make it thin on top. I think Bridget ought to get a shave too, but ladies don't do that. The barber wants her to take a lot of other things, but he can't make a monkey out of her. That schoolgirl complexion. I wonder if the Big Bam will get that $85,000 contract he's asked for. You probably know that the Yanks have refused to give the Babe the raise he wanted this year, so he's holding out and having a good time while he's waiting. I don't know who'll hold out the longest, but I think we'll see him back at the plate next spring, knocking him over the fence. Now he's going to swing a different kind of club. What a drive! A homer! Already, she's higher than any other building in the world, and when she's finished, she'll be 102 stories. The height doesn't seem to make any difference to the steelworkers. They must have wire cables for nerves. It makes me dizzy to look at them, and yet they're as nonchalant as though they were on the avenue. At that, they'll probably die from slipping in the bathtub or stepping off the curb. Just think, 900 feet in the air and flirting with death, so that another building can go up, a building that'll cost $55 million. These are some of the best men in the business, steel men, steel all the way through, earning their daily bread where a misstep means eternity. But look at them. It seems that I'm worrying more about it than they are. It must take a lot of nerve to handle a job like that. It's more nerve than most of us have. 5,000 kids, junior fascists, are getting ready to do their stuff. They're spreading out over the athletic field like a wave. And Mussolini is proud of his young, ready-made army. The boys were drilled for months for this great occasion, just like a giant machine with all its little parts functioning like clockwork. It's a beautiful sight, but its purpose is to train them to coordinate, teamwork, instead of the individual. Mussolini is so interested he can't keep his eyes off the boys. But it must have been a good joke at that to make him laugh. The lads are working hard. Each one wants to be a Mussolini. Over here, the boys want to be firemen when they grow up. The man is placing an emergency oxygen tank around Eleanor's neck, and she'll need it too. Off she goes for the highest climb ever made by any woman, and she's only a girl of 18. It's a risky job because there isn't much air up there, but she's as game as they make 'em. A big crowd made the trip to see her, and an hour later, they watched her big monoplane drop out of the skies. The girl in that plane has just come out of a faint brought on by the terrific pressure up above, but she makes a fine landing. Here's poor Eleanor, safe but half dead. She's been up 32,000 feet, 8,000 more than the record. The barograph says so. Some high flyer, Eleanor. Here they come, 184 of them. It's the start of the Boston Marathon, 26 miles and 385 yards. Gosh, I'd be out of business just running the yards. Somewhere in that crowd is a man who has run this race every year for 19 years. Auto fumes almost stopped him once, but he stuck to it gamely. Here he is. Doesn't even look as if he's warmed up yet. And now the finish. Brother Legionnaires from the Melrose Post drape the flags over him. Governor Allen hands him a medal, and he sure earned it. The last days of the gallant St. Louis, built in 1905 at a cost of $3 million, and now worth only $150,000 as scrap metal. Heroine of several rescues, she's one of the 58 American ships to be scrapped by 1936, according to the treaty. It's interesting at this time to recall the promise of Briand of France and Henderson, British Foreign Secretary, that their countries are willing to abolish battleships. It looks like a bright future for world peace, unless they get to fighting about it. This year's election was particularly important in view of the prediction of the fascist leader Prince von Stauffenberg that his party, known as the Heimwehr, would rule in Austria. The prince is a follower of Hitler in Germany, and he figured that Austria would follow that country's lead. But he was doomed to disappointment. His Heimwehr party managed to secure 8 votes out of a total of 165. And now the ex-chancellor, Dr. Schober, the man with the white beard, is sitting pretty, because the Christian Social Party, which threw him out of power, now needs his vote to overcome the socialist lead. It would seem that Hitler didn't make such a hit over there. For once in his life, the weatherman was a good egg on Easter, and he gave us a great chance to sport our new outfits. Not for years has Atlantic City had such a crowd. It was so warm that hundreds rode in the rolling chairs without any earmuffs. Did you wear your spring hat? I did, and I wore it all winter too. It used to be the 400 who paraded on Fifth Avenue on Easter Sunday, but now it looks more like 4 million. Here's the crowd at St. Patrick's Cathedral, which was packed to the doors all day by devout worshipers. Police had to be called in to keep people in line. Funny thing how the high hats have disappeared. Hard to find one here. Society must have gone lowbrow. Oh, here's a few. What do you mean society? Uh-oh. Wonder if Wall Street did this. Well, here's our first answer to Lipton's challenge. And look at the size of her. She's under her own sail only 6 days after the launching. Some quick work, and she certainly looks good. Harold Vanderbilt at the wheel is having the thrill of his rich, young life trying her out for the first time, and he's got all his friends on board. Here's a picture that spoiled the whole day for me. Say, when is vacation time anyway? The blasting of Washington's chin, and the first step in the world's largest monument is finished. Soon they'll start on Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt. The heads alone will be 60 feet high, and Washington's nose is 19 feet long, as big as the head of the Sphinx in Egypt. You can get a good idea of the size of the monument by these men playing leapfrog along the nose of the father of his country as they gather the unveiling flag. It's a grand undertaking. The statue will be visible for miles in the Black Hills country and will last for hundreds of centuries. The model shows you the completed job. Roosevelt will be to Lincoln's left. The boys of Mather Field just got a tip that the enemy is coming to bomb their hangars, and they're going to fill the air so full of fog that even a Londoner couldn't find his way. First, they build walls of smoke around the field. See how it clings to the ground and spreads out. The next thing is to put a ceiling of smoke over the airport. It must be very tight with no leaks or the enemy will sneak through. It's getting so thick that I don't think the boys will ever find their way out. Other planes keep spreading fresh trails of smoke so that it won't blow away too quickly. Well, the enemy couldn't find us, so we'll try to find him. The whole gang is with us. They'll be along in just a minute now. This isn't a real war, but it's exciting just the same. And a sight like this gives you a real thrill, doesn't it? Every man jack of them is a king of the air. Some of them are aces. The eyes of Uncle Sam, and he'll never need glasses. Here's the model with the best lines in America. See how quickly her rivals are eliminated, and she stands alone, the country's most beautiful girl model. She's 5'7", weighs 118 pounds, and is a blue-eyed blonde. She won fairly. Figures don't lie. "40,000 people attended the 40th running of the Preakness. Earl Sandy in polka dots leads the march to the post. It was a gorgeous day, and the crowd was primed for a great racetrack drama, and they weren't disappointed. They're off. Gallant Fox, the favorite, is smothered behind the field. The leader is Pterodactyl. Crack Brigade is second and Snowflake third. Gallant Fox is back in the ruck with Sandy fighting for position. They're making fast time as they round the turn, stringing out for the 1 3/16 run. It looks bad for the favorite, and Sandy realizes that the shortest way home is the long way. The crowd wonders as Sandy breaks for the outside. They're at the far turn now and coming into the stretch. Sandy is moving up faster and faster. He overtakes the leaders one by one. He's calling on every ounce of stamina in his wonderful horse, and Gallant Fox responds. And how he responds. Now he's even with Crack Brigade. They're neck and neck, and Sandy lifts the favorite over the finish. Winner by 3/4 of a length. The race won $52,000. And now Sandy will ride Gallant Fox in the Kentucky Derby. A great race, Sandy boy. When news is scarce, you can depend on Lindy to make some. Here's the finish of his great flight. He and Mrs. Lindbergh have been going 180 miles an hour all day, but they look as fresh as daisies. They left California in the morning and reached New York that same night, and only stopped once for gas. Seems almost impossible. Some ride, some flyer. And Mrs. Lindbergh helped a lot, too. She acted as the navigator the whole way. Well, he's going to get out to see how the ground feels. But first, he has to look his new plane over to be sure it's all right before he tucks it into bed. Breakfast in California, lunch in Kansas, dinner in New York. On his next trip, he'll probably take supper on the moon. It wouldn't surprise me a bit. Here's a new gadget for rescue work. It looks great, but they don't say how they get the thing up to the 4th floor while a fire's burning. Going down, and he finally makes it. And here's how it looks to an eagle. Yep, she makes it too. You ought to get a look at this girl's face. She's really pretty if you pay attention. Hello, what's this? Well, if it isn't a living Frankfurter without the tights. That's a great idea for tired dogs. We're in a blimp, out for a look at the fleet. But first, we'll pay a visit to the new George Washington Bridge, the longest single span in the world. See our shadow over it down below? There she is, looking over the Jersey Shore. And now we're gazing down across Manhattan, and we see the cables from the high pier. The spinning wheel is coming up carrying one of the wires. The men quickly catch it and weave it into one of the big cables that help support the 3,500-foot span. There are hundreds of miles of wire in these cables, one of the biggest bridge jobs ever attempted since they started building them. There's part of the big fleet seen through the pier. Uncle Sam's Navy parked in the Hudson River. Let's take a look from a distance. And close by, you can see one of the ocean-going bloodhounds. And here are a few more. A fine picture. Maxie is anxious for June 12th to come around. This is the first time he's worn leather in this country since last August. Max looks pretty fit, weaving in and out like Dempsey, and in good shape. Experts declare it's all wrong to train down fine with no fat to take off. There must be some excess weight to work on. But wait until the big bout. We shall see what we shall see. Jack doesn't seem to be worrying any either. He's spending his time on the links and making a good job of it. There won't be any yelling for, though, when he and Schmeling face each other. Well, the 12th of June will tell. It was 4 years ago, when Mr. Coolidge was president, that he signed the bill authorizing the building of this dam. The water is from the Gila River, and it looks as quiet as Silent Cal himself. The dam cost $10 million, but by irrigating 1 million acres of land, it will save hundreds of Indians from poverty and suffering on the Sacaton Reservation. In addressing his audience, Mr. Coolidge dedicated the dam to the advancement of the nation. About 20,000 people were there, and among them, many Indians. After the speech, a big party had a bite to eat on top of the dam, which was like sitting in a roof garden 250 feet up. See the Indians there? They're from the Pima and Apache tribes who used to be fighting each other all the time. Mr. and Mrs. Coolidge sat at the table with them, and I guess they were pretty hungry according to the picture, especially Mrs. Coolidge. After dinner is always a good time for a puff, so Mr. Coolidge smoked the pipe of peace and then handed it to the chief of the Pimas. After he had a puff, he gave it to the Apache chief, who came in his best Sunday feathers. Looks like an old cigar store sign. George Dukakis, Greek philosopher, is bidding farewell to his friends. The barrel is of oak with a steel lining which he designed himself especially for his fatal plunge. It weighs more than a ton and carries an oxygen supply for 3 hours. With him goes a pet turtle, 105 years old. George is waving his last goodbye to the world, which he will never see again. In addition to the inside steel trapdoor, there is an exterior clamp and then a manhole locked by 16 bolts. All is ready, and now he's taking his last ride on his way to the rapids. The swift waters are turning the barrel over and over. The current takes it irresistibly and definitely. There is no turning back. There seems to be a deadly purpose to the swift, sure journey of the doomed man. The mighty falls are reaching out. Closer and closer he comes to the brink of the cataract. A long moment, and he's over. The ride of death. While the waterfall sings a dirge over its unhappy victim. The barrel is caught on the rocks below, and the oxygen gives out. George has gone to the Olympus of his ancestors. Only the turtle is alive, 105 years old, doomed to live, as his master was doomed to die. The Royal Air Force puts on a little show for the boys and girls. This stunt is for signaling and smoke screens and has nothing to do with skywriting. The crowd ate it up. See that thing up there on the left? That's the autogyro. The other goof is a plane. Looks like a bat, doesn't it? Six parachute jumpers made the crowd gasp by a simultaneous leap from low altitude. That requires nerve, but they're experienced jumpers and have it all figured out. And landing together is no mean stunt either. But here's the prize. Snap the whip in the sky. When it comes to flying, what it takes, they've got. Max Smith is teeing off, the runner-up in the great contest at the Interlochen Country Club. And now Bobby Jones, after a moment's deliberation, drives the ball straight down the fairway, and the gallery of 10,000 is off on the 4-mile hike. Bobby played a weird game, brilliant and erratic. He started the final round with a 5-stroke lead, but Smith picked up 4, and then Bobby showed his genius on the home green. He just lost 2 strokes to par on a water hazard and was left with a 40-foot putt. Every breath stops as Bobby putts and makes it. 40 feet for a birdie 3. The crowd went wild, and Bobby won his 3rd championship this year. Never equaled in golf history. British Open and Amateur and American Open. What a player, the one and only Bobby Jones. Here they are, the pride of Lenox Avenue. Brown-skinned bathing beauties competing for the Pulchritude Prize. They're the pick of the colony, and the judges had a hard time deciding the winner. They had to call in a couple of extra judges. They seem to be quite at home in this kind of job. It's easy to see they're not the bashful type. I think they've decided on the winner. Yep, her name is Noma Long, and in a minute you'll see her. Going up, beauty's only skin deep. I hear Noma Long will be married soon. Well, it won't be long now. There is something new under the sun. Now we have water skis. That's where they got the idea to call feet canal boats. It's pretty risky. If you lose your balance, you're out of luck because you can't navigate. I don't understand them. They've got a river and paddles. Why don't they get a boat? The water's becoming rougher and the trip's more dangerous. But they should worry. It's a quaint Austrian custom. The water skis were invented by a pedestrian who wanted to avoid automobile traffic. Now he's in the real rapids. He's taking his life in his feet. Someday, I'm going to pluck up enough courage and try that stunt on the sidewalk. Another swell way of making a living. Wait till you see this one. It's the last word in giving audiences palpitation of the heart. Get ready. Watch it. Here they come. And plunk. Safe. This time anyway. Again. Down. A double loop. Wham! And I'm glad that's over. Having a great time in Atlantic City. Don't worry. They're all right. And they'll prove it. See? Meet the fearless Greggs with no more nerves than a cucumber. For the first time in history, the Wimbledon Championships were played by two Americans. Helen Wills and Elizabeth Ryan are in the finals. Helen's in great shape, much better than her opponent who bid for the championship in 1912. There was a brilliant crowd to see the match, which was all Helen's. Poor Miss Ryan didn't have a chance against the younger woman, but she was game and worked hard in the face of overwhelming odds. The final score was 6-2, 6-2, and Helen remains champion for another year at least. I guess there's not much fun in having nobody left to beat. Incidentally, this was the first time Helen had ever gone to Europe without her mother. But she's Mrs. Moody now, so I suppose it's all right. And here she is, back home again, queen of the courts. And was she glad? Look at her. She doesn't seem very moody, does she? Mabel Denny and Aileen Long were sentenced to 30 days in jail for insulting the flag. Mobs threatened the communist camp where they injected radical principles into the minds of the children there. But the authorities prevented violence, and the camp proceeded to break up with no one harmed physically. It's remarkable how easily these children turn to communistic ideas and how naturally they're led to believe in the martyrdom of the two fiery young women. You can see the youngsters bidding them farewell while they're receiving lunches to eat on the trip back. The Reds believe in starting them young, and the kids are easily swayed. The younger they are, the harder they fall. The very last word in something or other. This Austrian invention is supposed to strengthen your body, but it looks as though all it'd do would be to give you a headache. 39 separate motions at the same time, combining all the pleasant sensations of a roller coaster and a runaway merry-go-round. It may be swell in Vienna, but I'll do my exercise in a hammock. Yes, sir. Each one weighs 300 pounds. The ice, not the girls. And every day, in every way, poor man is pushed further into the background. They're Betty and Isabel Van Heusen, and they're helping their father. He can't work on account of illness, and so they've become the world's first pair of lady icemen. They handle the whole thing themselves, and they know how, too. I wouldn't advise anybody to get fresh with them. Couldn't they give you an icy stare, though? And talk about a cold shoulder. It's tough on the poor cook now. She can't entertain the Iceman in the kitchen anymore. The world's worst automobile race. The cars seem to have more sense than the drivers. They keep going anyhow. And how any of these apes expect to win is hard to understand. With all that monkey business going on. This is an annual event in Venice, but the drivers never seem to learn by experience. This one just couldn't stand it any longer. I guess they were never cut out to be mechanics. And the drivers have no sporting ethics either. Cutting in isn't fair, but it works. And the race looks to be about over with the checkered banner flagging the winner. All all set for the 28th annual running of the Gold Cup race. It's a thrill to see him churning through the water, the fastest motorboats in the East. This is Hotsy Totsy's third try at the trophy. Twice she was entered as a displacement boat, but this year she came back with 5 steps built into her bottom and a motor able to stand 3 90-mile heats without a sputter. You couldn't hold her back. She passed them all with room to spare and showed plenty of class as the leading contender in the Shrewsbury River Classic. And talk about real speed. You'd never think that she'd been out of competition for 2 years when you see this lightning streak. But they've worked on her and groomed her, and now she's making good. It's all over now, and Victor Kleesrath is cooling her off and taking the hot out of Hotsy Totsy. She brought joy to the Montauk Yacht Club this night. That's Vic on the left. Here's Mr. Hoover coming towards us. See him hurrying home to lunch. He's very anxious to have his old office fixed up as he has to work in borrowed quarters. The repairs are supposed to be made in 2 months. The contractor gets $200 for each day under that, but if he goes over, he gets fined the same amount. Maybe that's the reason you don't see the men eating any lunch. Imagine an income of $4,000 a day. That's what General Mafu Sang draws down from his opium traffic. The general is absolute ruler of a territory about as large as Pennsylvania and employs an army of 40,000 troops. Here he is with his children and favorite wife on a visit to one of his poppy plantations. It is from the lovely poppy that the frightful drug is obtained. The petals are removed and the opium is extracted from the core. A special knife is used to pierce the delicate plant so that there'll be no waste. Enormous water wheels are driven by the Yellow River to irrigate the great poppy plantations, the beautiful cause of unspeakable misery. The last word in style. Take it from Martin, famous hairdresser. Clasps of rubies to match the gown, or a band of emeralds for the curls. You can wear earrings to match, but no necklace. And if you like, a string of diamonds running across the back. The first American to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature since it was established 29 years ago. He and his wife are off to Stockholm to receive the honor and the $46,350 that goes with it. The famous author of Main Street is trying to learn Swedish. 40,000 wild-eyed baseball bugs gather to see the famous 4th game of the 27th World Series. Sportsman's Park is host to the visiting Athletics and the 3 murderers, Jimmy Fox, Al Simmons, and Mickey Cochran. Before the game, Gabby Street and Connie Mack pretend they're bosom pals for the benefit of the cameraman, while the crowd cheers itself hoarse. The first inning, and Jess Haynes lets Bishop come home after a hot single to right field by Simmons. In the third, Grove shoots one right across for Gelbert, and Charlie smacks it a mile over first base. And before Miller can reach it, the kid lands safely on third. And then he scores when Jess Haynes punches a clean single to center. In the fourth, Happy hits a long liner behind the screen and takes 2 bases on ground rules. Wilson advances Blades, and then Blades scores on Charlie Gelbert's infield single. And if nothing else ever happens in St. Louis, they certainly saw a ball game. There was a dispute over a mortgage, and Mrs. Grace Jones and her family find themselves in the open. However, they may be out, but they're not down, and they said they'd stay right where they are until they get their home back. You have to put the cat out before breakfast. It's a habit. And of course, one has to shave before dining out. And the family sits down to a meal under the sky with hard luck staring them in the face. But they're not discouraged and carry on just as though they had walls surrounding them. No more homemade money for these birds. They're telling it to the federal attorney, and he certainly has the goods on him. The equipment was able to turn out 50 $20 bills a day. One of the gang passed a bill to a tailor. He was suspicious and took the license number of the man's car. Then he went to the bank and found out that the bill was phony. He reported the number and made his complaint. That's pressing a suit. Well, it's just too bad. Poor old Shamrock never had a chance. She crosses the starting line ahead of the Enterprise, but could only keep her advantage for 20 minutes. Then Skipper Vanderbilt gets busy, and it's a walk-away. Outsailed and outgeneraled, the Lipton sloop loses ground every minute. So far, there have been 40 races since 1851, and the Defender has won 37 of them. Several times it was no tea party, but the results were always the same. The Shamrock should have been a four-leaf clover. Incidentally, Enterprise broke the record for the course, clipping 3 minutes and 5 seconds from the mark made by the Columbia in 1901. The winning time for this race is 3 hours, 10 minutes, and 5 seconds, beating the Shamrock by nearly 6 minutes. Sir Thomas fought a gallant fight, but he just couldn't make the grade. And now it's all over. Probably the last contest for the old mug, worth $43.20, and more than $15 million spent on it. Here she is. They're bringing the former Queen of the Seas in a little earlier this year to give her a new overcoat of paint and to check things over before she starts her winter traveling. That's because they want the men to get some work now. Even the Leviathan is doing her share to see that jobs are handed out. And when she finally lands in the dry dock of the Boston Navy Yard, 500 men swarm aboard. Painters, mechanics, laborers, all working in high gear so that she won't lose too much time off her run. And it looks like a good omen because many other ships soon will be going through that same massaging and manicuring and the other aids to add to their feminine charms. That means work for thousands of men. It looks more like machine guns than big guns. The men belong to a battery of the 63rd Coast Artillery, the youngest regiment in the Army. Here comes the towing plane, and right behind her is the sleeve target. And take a look at those bursts if you want to know what real shooting is. They're firing 125 rounds a minute per battery, twice the requirements of the War Department. Their marksmanship is amazing. With the 1918 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, the projectile weighs 28 pounds, and it costs $90 every time they fire a salvo. The muzzle velocity is 2,400 feet a second, and the effective range is 10,000 feet, so you'd better keep 2 miles away if you don't want to do any dirty work. The 63rd has a lot to be proud of. The famous monorail is the scene of an inspection by a group of American traction experts who are thinking of installing a similar line on Long Island, New York, not far from Whitestone. Elberfeld is noted for this unique railway system, which follows the River Whopper through the town. The system is simple, the central I-beam overhang taking the place of tracks on the ground. It was invented by Langen, the famous mathematician, and was first used in factories to send materials from one point to another. Later, it was adapted to passenger transportation. As we ride on it, we can see how smoothly she runs, with no jars or bumps. They've had no accidents, and it looks all right, but I don't know. I think I'd rather walk. Every year, the kids in New York are treated to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. All the comic sections come to life in the form of funny balloons. 100,000 children flock to the line of march to see their favorites. Jiggs and Mrs. Jiggs, and all sorts of rubber comedians, made especially for this grand occasion. Everybody is present, and here comes Mutt bouncing around, and right in back of him is his little partner, Jeff. And the whole Funny Page family, cats and jammers and all. The parade is supposed to usher in the Christmas season, and the holiday spirit is reflected in the jolly painted faces of the queer figures. At the end of the parade, they prepare to set the balloons free, with prizes offered for their recovery. And there goes a funny face. Looks like one of the Goops. Some lucky kid'll get $25 for him. And then old Fritz, up he goes, higher and higher, and away toward the Empire State Building, the world's tallest structure. And won't somebody be surprised away off in the country to see this new kind of blimp high up in the sky? He'll need a parachute to come down. A group of debutantes have taken over this field, not far from Berlin. They're tired of cabarets and late hours and have decided to give up gliding on the dance floor and take up gliding from a hill. And they're really serious about it. And the dressmakers are glad because they've created a new costume, the glider suit. Maybe they're doing it because they want to wear the new outfit. You never can tell. And there she goes, soaring gracefully through the air. And we'll take a ride with her. The first time a motion picture was ever taken from a glider. In the air, right along with her. High society, sure enough. It's lots of fun. And you can't get hurt if you make a landing like that. The new session of the 71st Congress is about ready to begin. And in the meantime, the communists are marching in defiance of the law that forbids gatherings in the vicinity of the Capitol. The police have a hard time dispersing the communistic ladies and gentlemen, and finally, tear guns are brought into play. The Reds insist on sticking around and fighting it out. And if they don't watch their step, some of the cops might start to lose their tempers. Another tear gas gun. And finally, the communists begin to get the idea that they're not so popular around there and scatter. Whoop! A regular barrage. Looks like the proper colors with red this winter of 1930 are black and blue.
These have been some of the highlights of the year 1930. While some nations have been trying to do away with the tools of war, others seem to be moving ominously in the opposite direction. At home, Congress prepares to try to stem the tide of unemployment. Many Americans have been touched by the Depression, but 1930 has only been a beginning. 1931 will see America's calamities spread and carry the whole world with it into despair.